Hey you, leavers and believers! Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya and this is a special bonus episode before the show. What show, you might ask? Hillsong Boy, of course. You might remember Scott and his wonderful wife Kat from the episodes By the Door of the Ear. Both of those guys are they're a married couple and they're both these highly qualified and trained musicians, and they very kindly and carefully walked us through how to make a Hillsong hit and lots of other tricks of the trade, as well as their own experiences of being musicians at Hillsong for many, many years. Since that time, Scott has developed a show and it is hitting the stages in Sydney this weekend. So we did a little pre-show interview. Entertainment tonight of us here at Leaving Hillsong. It's a fun and exciting conversation talking about somebody's own deconstruction, a deconstruction process that's just unique, creative, individual, artistic, devastating, very, very painful. There's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of sweat and tears gone into this one. So why would somebody want to make a show called Hillsong Boy? Let's find out. And we'll catch up with them after the show as well. So let's have a chat to the Hillsong Boy with Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Tanya.
Wow. Good evening. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm a little bit tired, a little bit croaky.
That's good news, right?
That's good news. Yeah, that's me being in rehearsal all week in a one-man show, yelling at the top of my voice in a theatre for 8 hours straight. That's all right. It's part of the process.
And I don't know if anything else has ever been done like this before. The show is called Hillsong Boy. So for people who have not yet had the chance to hear you and your wonderful wife on the episode's called By the Door of the Ear, give us a bit of background on like your relationship with Hillsong. Because the personal tale. What's your history?
Yeah, so I came to Hillsong around year 2000, 2001. I was about 13 years old at the time, and I kind of got sucked in to the vortex that is Hillsong. I was part of the youth ministry, and then eventually, because I'm a singer, I got involved with the worship team, and then was on worship team for a number of years. And in total, I was at Hillsong for about 20 years. There was like tours involved in that, where I went on tour with like pastors, and I, got very, very involved in all aspects of the world of Hillsong. And then, in 2019, I left, got out of there.
Yeah, you stayed right, didn't you?
Yeah. Straw that broke the camel's back was the Scott Morrison election. And then I was on stage, and we'd been asked to, they have these in-ears that you're supposed to wear, in-ear monitors. They kind of help you hear yourself when you're on stage. They're kind of a safety tool as much as anything, but basically after many years of Hillsong providing these in-ear monitors, they decided not to. And I started getting a little bit antsy about that, because I was like, I have volunteered here for 20 years. Well, and, I felt like the least they could do was to offer some sort of, given that this was a tool that was required to do the job I was volunteering in, but they wanted me to go and buy them. And they were, like $150 for a pair of these things, right? So I was just, I don't know, I made a thing about it, probably too much of a thing about it. But then the morning after the election of Scott Morrison, everybody was jubilant, and somebody yelled out down the front of the crowd, ScoMo, really loudly. And I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I can't do this. And I walked off stage, and I never came back. But
always so interesting what kind of, because it's obviously not about in ears as much as the, principles. It reminds me that one of when didn't Pharaoh take away the bricks that they had to build things, to make their own top of everything else. Not like they're wanting for cash. So I can see the slap in the face. So what's that? That's nearly 5 years ago. And then, I mean, yeah, where did this show come from? What?
Well, I'd actually been talking to people about this show while I was at Hillsong. It obviously wasn't the show that is being put on, but I definitely was aware while I was at Hillsong that I was living in this very unique sort of world, and was interested in exploring that. And the other side of the story is that I'm queer, so I'm bisexual. And during my time at Hillsong, I had a relationship with a guy that was done sort of, I guess, creatively, because obviously if anybody had found out, I would have, been kicked off the team. I would have lost my friends.
You were both in college or just him?
No, just him. He was in college.
Yep.
I very thankfully did not do Hillsong College.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would have been sent back. He would have had his visa taken away and sent back.
Oh.
So we knew that there was big risks involved, and there was a lot of like stuff going on in my head as well, because obviously there's a lot of like guilt trippy sort of stuff that Hillsong implants in there that can be hard to dislodge, especially when you're doing something that is, in inverted commas, wrong. So, there was all of that context as well.
So, I mean, the premise of the show is an intersection of queerness and music and celebrity, and all mixed in with the cult of Hillsong. Have I got that right?
Yeah, we felt like there was a bit of
yes. But I see it. I can see it. I haven't seen it yet, but I see it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what the show has become. Like when I had initially started talking to some people about it, and I, met up with some people and sort of discussed it, it was back in the days of the Hillsong days. I was like, no, I really want to try and find a reconciliation of my queerness and being at Hillsong. Now, obviously, that was not possible. That was never going to happen.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were some people that were receptive to the idea and other people who weren't. And I knew the church was never going to get on board with that. And so it sort of just sat fallow for probably, I would have been thinking about it around 2016, 2017. So it's been a while. And then once I was out of Hillsong, I started talking to people about it. I talked to Felicity, my director, about it. And she was like, I'm so on board whenever you want to do this. And then Robbie, my producer as well, was like, I'm so on board if you want to do this. And so I gathered the team together and we're making the show. But yeah, the premise of the show is that, I guess we had a really delicate balance to strike, because we knew that as soon as it was like, oh, here's somebody who was involved at Hillsong for 20 years on stage, there'd be a lot of people who just want to kind of hear about the scandals and the craziness of it all. And, I'm totally fine with doing that, but I felt like it was a bit of like, it was trod territory. Like it was territory that like has been covered probably much better than I would be able to do it. And we thought the show might be much more impactful if it was sort of autobiographical. And in that way, the show kind of focuses on my queerness and the way that has kind of interacted with my Christian walk that was shaped through Hillsong as well as Hillsong itself. But then also the music and celebrity culture and all of that as well. And so the show kind of has 3 very distinct acts, and it ends with me sort of direct addressing the audience and talking to the audience, but it's not just that. There's like lots of other kind of stuff happening in the show. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to spoil too much just in case people haven't seen it, but yeah, it's
a musical. I mean, you're a singer.
At the moment we're working to pretty tight time. There's one of my songs in the show, because obviously getting the rights to a Hillsong song for a show like this was probably not going to happen. So I had, during my time at Hillsong, I wrote a lot of songs. I never pitched them to anyone because I was always very insecure about the work. I guess I was worried that I'd be rejected for them, or they'd get rejected. I didn't know how that was going to hit me. And so I never pitched any of my songs to the church. And we thought it might be nice because I've got them all. I recorded them all. They're all saved.
Wonderful.
We chose one of the songs that I wrote and developed it into a song that kind of forms the centerpiece of the work, and sort of shifted some of the lyrics a little bit, just so that they kind of resonated with the themes of the show a little bit more. And Kat, my wife, on all of the music for it. So she's kind of helped get the track sounding like a Hillsong track. And it does sound like a Hillsong track.
Kat is a professionally trained musician who had her own decade or so in Hillsong herself, didn't she? Where you guys met along the
Yeah. She played piano and violin for church, keys and violin. And yeah, she was there on the weekend doing the same thing I was, just as a musician, whereas I was one of the vocalists. So yeah, the song is very, yeah, she's done a really good job with it. It sounds really cool. I'm really happy with it.
Wow.
It sounds very Hillsong.
Well, I mean, what was it like? You've got a young child, you're married. What was it like working on something? I mean, it's not it's not a light topic. There's so many intense intersections of serious issues going on. What was that like to work together?
Yeah, look, it's been tough because we're both very busy people. So, you know,
Mm.
we work closely together, but also like we're working, like I work a full-time job and I also work a little part-time job as well to kind of make ends meet. Kat is
Mm.
very much the same. She's working 4 different jobs at the moment while we do this. So there's a balance to be had. And I think the themes are very intense themes, but Kat is a wonderful musician and a very quick worker and able to like just slam through things. I have to say, like, I've probably not been the nicest to work with just because I've been I think the content itself has unlocked something for me that's meant that I've kind of had to go and get some counseling around some stuff. I definitely thought that I had all of this stuff under wraps, but it's funny once you kind of unbottle the genie or whatever, it's sort of very hard to go back from that. And I think Kat has been really accommodating of that and talked
No.
very openly about it. And, she's really excited about the show as well. Like she's very invested in the show, obviously. And, we've collaborated on a lot of shows together before. Like Kat and I work together a lot because, I mean, let's do
Mhm, mhm.
so but it definitely is a different experience to work on something that is so personal. And, there are questions to be had between us about, oh, do you really want to include that in the show? And being like, well, how much censoring do we want to do after 20 years of censoring? Like,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm.
but yeah,
It's
I
not,
don't know if that's a super cohesive answer to that question. It's a very
no, look,
complex one.
uh, one of the things I love watching is, when people have left and they're kind of the dust has settled a bit, there are different ways of, contributing to the evangelical or deconstruction space. And the, producing a show is so far outside of my realm of imagination. I'm just very much a words person. So, it's fascinating to watch people process in their own ways. And it sounds like this kind of evolved as you were creating it. And I mean, the other thing is I often think that when you look at this stuff, it often reminds me of like putting your arm down the sink because you dropped your engagement ring. But when you pull your arm back up, there's all like slime. So you go kind of fishing around
Yeah.
memory, but all these other, this other stuff comes out that you weren't
Mm.
really expecting. How did you find that? But in this artistic way as well. So it's not like you're journaling, you're
Yeah.
creating, remembering, and
I
does that make
think, yeah. I mean, like the whole process of the show has been, so like for context, I wrote about 18,000 words of
sense?
various different types of performative text that, and some not so performative that Felicity and I then filtered through and were
Mhm.
like, this is useful. This is not. What's a running theme? What is a running pattern that's coming out here? What's emerging? Which is,
What? Yeah.
it's a creative process, but it's sort of accidentally becomes a therapeutic process in a way. Like you
Beautiful.
find
Yeah.
yourself looking at patterns in your own writing and things that have been a highlight to you. Or I guess like the thing that was really interesting for me was to think about how, like, in a lot of ways, I don't know if I would have got out of Hillsong if it wasn't for my queerness. Like, I think I was
Right.
sort of too deep in a way, but there was this irreconcilable part of myself that I couldn't really, because I have this habit of honesty with myself, which gets me into a lot of trouble. I couldn't reconcile that. And I think, pulled me out of the church. And so, like, one of the things we've been sort of toying with in terms of like a kind of final dramatic thread of the work is that queerness sort of saved me, you know?
Isn't that interesting? So many people that I have spoken to interviewed, on the pod, but spoken to over the years seem to tell the same story. And it is such a high percentage of people from LGBT plus backgrounds. And it's a question I've often wondered, like, is it because, these are people that are so badly treated that they have no other choice, because that's what it comes down to time and time and time again. I've heard people say it was my life or getting out of there were my choices. It's such a reality. Or is it that they're also the truth teller people as well, because, they maybe had to confront stuff before? I don't know, but it's, I'm just so convinced this will resonate with a lot of people in the audience, directly involved or affected, or know somebody who's gone through something similar. And I also think it's so honest of you to say that. There's no virtue signaling saying, hey, if the boat's not getting rocked, things might have been okay.
Yeah. The other thing we'd sort of played with is because it's funny having Felicity on the project, right? Because Felicity has no experience with Hillsong, except that she was skeptical of it and thought it was a bit crazy and weird. But then when we started discussing it, it was sort of over the course of 6 months of filtering through this content and trying to develop a script. I, in some ways, inducted her into the language of Hillsong and the structures of Hillsong and the people who are in Hillsong and like how it all works and what all of this does. And like, why do we say this, or why do we have this service, or what is a conference? All things that felt self-explanatory to me, I had to explain to her and to the team. And that in that process, she came out of it and was like, Scott, it's a cult. And I was like,
okay,
I don't want to call it a cult. Like, I mean, a cult is a very particular thing. Like there is a definition of a cult. And she was like, okay, well, let's go look for the definition and you tell me if this matches. Anyway, there are lots of different definitions of cults, but there's an organization in the US, which it's People Leave Cults or something like that. It's the name of the organization. But they had a definition that was they worked really hard on their website to give a definition of it. And yeah, I mean, we read that definition and we were like, oh, actually, yeah, there's a lot of that stuff going on. And it's not like, Kool-Aid cups and white robes level.
And Nikes and stuff. Yeah. Going, well, I mean, Gucci, but no one's wearing Nike to go to heaven and stuff on a spaceship. But it's more like a functional cult is how you guys were talking about earlier. It's always so interesting when a kind of a somewhat neutral source sees these things and sees them pretty quickly as well. I mean, how do you then get that across to audiences who, we were talking about the scandals before. Hillsong's almost now famous for this, all the scandals. How do you kind of relay that to audiences who don't know the more nuanced kind of the subtle experience?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking, your own experience is so valid at 20 years worth of devotion. Those are the real gritty stories, not these sort of one-off celebrity scandal stuff. Yeah. How do you kind of get that across to people who don't know anything apart from the headlines? Yes.
We've done as much as we can to kind of focus on the micro level of day-to-day life at Hillsong as much as we do the celebrity. Like the whole show starts with the big celebrity moment because ultimately I think, my time at Hillsong is characterized by me attempting to climb the ladder of Hillsong stardom, right? I wouldn't have called it that at the time, but, looking back, that's effectively what I was doing. I wanted to worship lead and I wanted to be one of the worship leaders. And I did worship lead. I was a worship leader. I wasn't one of the worship leaders, but, I knew the people and I knew how to do the thing. And, I had friends who had won Grammys and stuff like that. Like I was, hanging with these people all the time. So we try and represent a bit of that sort of world, as well as there's the conversion therapy, I think really does bring it down to earth, because all of a sudden you are talking about flesh and bodies and not this kind of high sort of intellectual discussion about what these scandals are or the gossipy, we love a bit of gossip, don't get me wrong, but I also really wanted to make it real. We end with me being extremely raw and extremely real with the audience and talking them through. Like I have a box of paraphernalia from Hillsong where I literally go through and I'm, talking about the stuff that happened, and I describe what my week looked like at Hillsong. I've calculated my hours, how many hours I spent at Hillsong over the course of 20 years, and it's about 7,878 hours approximately, which is
of your youth as well, like not even
yeah.
years, like the good years too.
Yeah, it's a full year without sleeping spent at Hillsong. That's what it works out at.
Well, which, from what I hear, isn't that uncommon. People feel like slept in 20 years. I mean, we don't want to do too many spoilers.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible.
So, look, I think in words. Like, I would have no idea how you create a show. And I know you guys have a little theatre, have a theatre company that you were running that's on the side.
Yeah, like I've been making theatre, like it's what I do. So, I have a little theatre company. It is a youth arts company. So we specifically work with young people or making work for young people. This is not a part of that company. We're called Matriarch Theatre.
Okay. How do you make a show? And like, how do you use things like lighting and music? I don't even understand what directors really do. Like, you know what I mean? To tell a story. Yeah, I only get word and paper. And how does that work?
Well, look, that's a big question.
Sorry.
I think, no, it's a good question. It's a really good one. This is one that Felicity would be really great to talk on. She's, I direct. I'm a bit more of a jack of all trades, sort of master of none type. Felicity is an excellent director. I mean, essentially what you're trying to do when you create a show is find a sort of central dramatic hook to kind of hinge everything on, to be like, this is the point we're trying to make. And that could be a question. It could be a statement. I think in the end, went with a couple of different statements and we sort of been toying with them, but somewhere around Hillsong is a cult and, queerness saved me. They're the two sort of central dramatic points. Yeah. If you find the right statement, then it's just about kind of going, well, every moment of the script needs to somehow speak to that and somehow progress our understanding of that. And then you want to just kind of sequence it and order it so that it makes sense and there's a story and there's a journey. And then when it comes to lighting and sound, they all do the same thing. You're looking at every moment, you're going, how do I make that point any clearer than it currently is? It's a very hard thing to do. Like, even though I direct shows, I'm the performer in this show. So I cannot direct myself. There is no way. You need to be able to step out of the work and see it. It's very hard to direct a theatre show while being in it. Yeah, that's the process of directing. Creating a show is another story entirely, right? Because creating a show is about literally pulling as much information as possible for as long as you can possibly do so, and then structuring and curating that information into a story or into, again, down to that central dramatic point. This feels like very, very wordy and like technical. But yeah.
I honestly, I have no idea how you make something out of nothing. I know how you could write an essay on it.
A lot of time, it's not, in some ways it's not creating something from nothing. You spend a long time finding some things, whether that involves researching, literally, like Tanya, your book was included in the research for the show. Like I read the book. I then went and talked to Felicity about what was in the book and what was interesting to me and what themes you'd brought up that were interesting to me. And we discussed that. And then like I went searching for old sermons. I went to try and find as much as I could about the history of Hillsong before I had arrived. I, dug into the scandals themselves and told the stories from my perspectives. And then I, like these are all different things we did. I did like a chart of all of the various different people at Hillsong Church during my time and how they all connected to each other and, what power they had within the church. And we created like a chart about these people. That is the process. The process is doing all of that and then going, okay, what's interesting to an audience? What does an audience care about?
And in terms of that hook, in terms of those themes, what is it that you would like people, whether they've, spent their own 20 years in the place or someone who doesn't know, maybe they got thrown a ticket for this Friday and Saturday night. What would you like people to walk away with, take from the show overall?
I think that this stuff is in people's backyards. We're not talking about something that's just disconnected from the day-to-day lives of most Australians. Evangelicalism, and I say evangelicalism because obviously Hillsong was leading the charge, but these behaviors and these ways of thinking are toxic, and they're in so many churches around Australia, and there's in so many of our politicians who lead our country, and they're all over the place. And the idea that we can just be like, well, it's over there with those crazies. It's not like that. Everybody knows somebody who's been involved in
Totally.
evangelicalism. It touches all of us. So it is our business when these people are having such a say in the way in which we structure society and decide on, it's at the core of, it's at the core of our country. It's in there. Like Scott Morrison is the example.
It's well and truly entrenched in our culture. I live not too far from what they call a PCYC, a police citizens youth club, police citizens youth club, and I need their printer, so I go in there, because printers hate me and stuff, right? So I went in there, and just so happens, because I know that Hillsong, were running some groups or something there once a week, and it been listening out. I meet the new youth worker who tells me how he, as a child, had been to after school groups run by Hillsong. And he said, they used to ask me for money. I didn't have any. I was a poor kid, and I thought that was wrong. And now he's got to be about 30. But he said, I like the Shine program, and I like the strength program for boys. And, we supervise what they do. And I thought, it's incredible. This is quite a random sort of encounter. And here he is, well-versed in Hillsong programs, even though he had a bad experience and he had to go to these school programs. He didn't go voluntarily. People still think they can draw the positive out of it or whatever. So it's entrenched in our culture. It's been in our schools for all this. We just don't have the separation of church and state that we need. So, it's definitely not those people over there at all.
No, absolutely not. We definitely address this idea of taking the good with the bad. And that is something that we really wanted to address, because, my instinct throughout the process, and I did a number of times in the early kind of creative process, was to be like, yeah, but it wasn't all bad. There were great times, and there were, but also, you'll have to come and see the show. we really, I'll crack into reciting the script to you, and I won't do that.
Tell me, so when this Friday night is opening night?
Yeah, this Friday night's opening night, and we sold out Friday, and we also have 2 shows on Saturday. Our second show is sold out, but we recently just opened up another show because, we sold out 2 weeks before the show was due to go up, which is great news. But we'd really love to have, I don't know, I really want to, I feel like it's a good solidarity moment for people. And I'm going to be around after the show, just kind of standing around on stage, and I'm hoping to kind of meet people who've had similar experiences and, to kind of connect and share. And I just think as much as there's theater where, the curtain goes down and we bow and then you see the actors afterwards, it's kind of not the type of theater I like to make. I like to make theater where I can kind of talk to people afterwards and hang out with them and, go and, share contact details and stuff. So, if people want to come and say hi, if people don't know anybody else, I expect that there'll be a few people. I've already had people kind of contacting me about it. So,
it's where the healing is, that people who have been isolated and disconnected, the connections, it's where the healing's at. That's so fantastic. How do people get tickets?
You can get them from Brand X in Darlinghurst. It's on the website there. So that's the best way to kind of do it. And if you look them up on Instagram, the season is called The Flying Nun. That's the name of the season. So The Flying Nun season. And they should have, if you can find them on Insta, that's probably the best place. They have a link there and you can kind of click it. And
I've got a Hillsong Boy Insta.
We do have a Hillsong Boy Insta. So yes, like the Hillsong Boy Insta. We will put the ticket link up there as well, obviously.
And there'll be one on the Leaving Hillsong Insta and Facebook. So is there any chance of another show, or like what's going to happen after this?
Oh yeah. Look, our hopes are that, the show, if it resonates with audiences, we'll get another chance to do it. We're actually going out to do another creative development later in the year. So yeah, you might see it later in the year, but yeah, I don't know what the future of the project is. So my recommendation would be like, come and see it like this. I don't know if it's going to be in a bigger theater in the future or, maybe never happen again. Like both are on the table right now.
Putting your whole insides out there it's the toughest thing, and showing yourself to the whole world. It's wonderful. Thank you for doing the work. I mean, thank you for making this happen. I'm very much looking forward to it. To happen. Go.
Yes, thanks, Tanya. Thanks. Yeah, I'm pumped. Yeah, come and see the show.
Yeah, awesome. See you then.